The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I want to introduce Morgan, who's going to kick it off for us.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Tobias with Monitronics Dealer Marketing. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Monitronics is partnering with N2O, who is going to kick off. This is the first of 6 monthly marketing webinars. Stay tuned, and we'll send email updates and post webinars on monitronics.net for future subjects and date time. So please check that for more information. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please put your phones on mute during the presentation so we don't get any background noises. And you can use the chat feature at any time to type questions to Greg, and he can answer them, or he may save them for when it's more convenient to him. But just please try to use that chat. And with further ado, here is Greg Groneman. He is the CEO of N2O, and he will be presenting today's information. So, Greg, take it away.
Thanks a lot. We're excited to be with you guys today, and we're excited about our partnership with Monitronics. I'm not sure if a lot of you have had a chance to see our original webinar that we did about a month ago, but it is posted on monitronics.net, and it does introduce N2O and our company and a little bit more about what we offer. But the point today is to really spend some time talking about how to grow your business with limited funds. And because it's a webinar, your phones are muted on our end just because of the background noise. It gets really crazy. So what we'll do is, if you have a question, you see on the little bar on the right, as Morgan just said, the ability to raise your hand. Go ahead and do that, or you can type the question in the box, and what we'll do is we can unmute your phone and we can just talk, or we can actually you can just type it in and then I'll just address it. So we can kind of do either one. The idea here today is to just introduce some things that you would do, presuming that you're a small dealer starting out. How do you grow your business? What are the things you should be thinking about and whatnot? To kind of just kick off this presentation, it's always worthwhile to at least introduce who I am, because obviously I'm here telling you how to grow your business. So I'm the CEO of N2O Systems, and N2O Systems, we have N2O Marketing, which is our marketing agency. We have N2O Interactive, which is our technology company, and then we have NitroQuotes, which is an online lead generation business that focuses on right now generating leads for the security industry, and we'll talk about some of that. But my primary job is Chief Marketing Officer for all of our customers. N2O has an interesting model in that we allow companies to timeshare a marketing department. So that gives us kind of a unique seat into the business in that we're kind of on the team, if you will. A couple interesting points of why I think we've got an interesting opinion on a lot of this stuff is that I actually worked at a Fortune 500 company. I ran marketing for a division of Icon. It was about a $4 billion company, and we had about 3,000 salespeople that we did stuff for, and it was the high growth area of the business. So I went from that to was brought in the senior management team by 3 private equity companies that bought the premium division of ADT called Sonitrol. We bought it for $125 million, and then we grew it $60 million in about 3 to 4 years, and then we sold it to Stanley for $275. So it was a pretty good little 3 years for us. But we grew the business, obviously, quite a bit. And then I also had responsibility not just for the marketing, but our dealer channel. We had about 100 dealers that we supported. And the reason I even tell you this, other than the fact that I do understand the industry and we've been successful in helping companies grow, but the more important fact is that I've seen marketing from a Fortune 500, $5 billion company seat. I've seen marketing from a $120 million company, or even, heck, a $60 million company when we started that chair. And I've seen marketing from working with our dealers, even something as small as not even $1 million. And I can tell you the view is dramatically different from each chair. And it's tough. It's really tough. And it's like a toolbox. The tools in the box are the same, but they're used differently in each scenario. And I think when you're a small dealer, you don't have a lot of bullets, so you can't waste them. You gotta shoot them wisely, and that's where the genesis of N2O came from. We wanted to specialize in the security industry because it's a unique industry. It's an industry where nobody wakes up in the morning and says, it's a good day to buy an alarm system. You know, they only buy an alarm system when there's been an event being they were broken into, their neighbor was broken into, a family member, or they're moving, they're relocating, they're doing an addition, a remodel. I mean, there's maybe 6 situations where someone actually is receptive. And because of that, we always say there's no such thing as a warm lead in the security industry. You know, you go from being ice cold, completely not interested, unless there's some compelling thing, a compelling reason of why someone should make the decision, to they walk downstairs one morning with their cup of coffee in their hand, and there's glass all over the floor, and somebody had broken in and stole some stuff out of their house, and they go freaked out. They go completely freaked out, and they're red hot. They go from ice cold to red hot, and they are going to make a decision sometimes within hours, and definitely within days. And then they go from being red hot to completely cold again. So it's really, really hard for marketing companies to come in the security space when those dynamics are so unique. You don't see that in anything else. You don't see that in you don't see the Coca-Cola marketing person have to figure that out, because people drink a Coke at morning, noon, and night, today, tomorrow, and the next day. It really doesn't matter. So it's more about getting the brand out there. But when the security space, it's about really getting somebody when they're hot and not wasting your money marketing them all the time when they're cold. So we built a company around the security industry. And we've worked with almost 100 security companies, local, regional, national alike. So we get it, we know it. And so the reason this is really the only kind of propaganda slide I'll have in here, the whole point of it is that we do understand what you're going through. We've seen it from a couple different chairs, and we understand it's hard. And so we've taken a viewpoint, because this is an educational webinar series, we've taken a viewpoint of, and here's the calendar, of if we were to sit down with you in a consulting role, what are some things that we would tell you? And we've broken them up into monthly topics. So today, we're going to talk about growing your business with limited funds. Next month, we plan to talk about lead generation tactics. So what are the various ways to generate leads for your business? We are going to talk about lead generation some today, but we're going to drill down into it in greater depth next month. And we'll talk about the expectations of each. We'll talk about the things you should try. I can tell you a lot of the things that we do, we've learned because we did it wrong when we were on the Fortune 500 payroll or the bigger company payroll. And so some of it's process of elimination, but I'd rather learn those lessons when you're working for a big company than a small one. In November, we're going to drill into one of the most popular things that's kind of out there. It's probably one of the easiest things to get into is paid search. The idea is that we look at Google, we look at Facebook, we look at LinkedIn, we look at Bing, and we compare paying to advertise on those sites and what they yield and why companies are moving to that. So that's in November. In December, we were going to look at social media. That's kind of a real popular thing of leveraging social media tactics and you know, how do you do it? Because it's one of those things that when you're a big company and you say social media, everybody kind of nods their head. But when you get to a little company, you know, the CEO of Central used to kid around and say, if I had somebody that had time to tweet, I'd fire them. So the value isn't always there when you're a little company because you kind of have all hands on deck and nobody's bored. So, but there's a way to do it, and I think it's important to do it, and there's a way to do it right. So we're going to kind of drill into that in December. And then the 6th one will be in January, and that is one that we're going to make it a dealer choice. So because of that, at the end of this webinar, as you're leaving, you'll get a questionnaire that'll pop up on your screen. It'll just ask you to rate today. And one of the questions is, you know, what are some things, other things you'd like to know a little bit about around the sales and marketing arena? So if you take a second and give us some ideas as we go through these webinars, these 4, we're going to kind of filter through these ideas and pick one, and that'll be our 6th webinar. So we wanted to give you guys have a chance to have some input in this series. Today we've got a good group, but there's still some folks, obviously, with Monitronics Network that aren't going to be able to make it today, and I'm sure there's probably folks in your office that weren't able to make it today because of one obligation or another. So we are recording this webinar today, and shortly thereafter, it'll be posted on the N2O Marketing.com Monitronics site. The link is at the bottom of the screen. We'll show it again at the end. If you go there, it'll not only have the original recording of when we introduce our services, but you'll also then see this presentation which will be posted there for your use, and you're free to use it however you want. So that'll be posted as a PDF. And then we'll also have the playback, so it'll actually be linked through a private YouTube channel, so it's not out there for the world to find, but if you have the link, you'll be able to see it. But you'll be able to see this actual webinar, including the audio and everything, played back, so you can share it with some of your team members or whatnot. So that's the calendar. So let's talk about growing your business. So, you know, it's tough to grow your business. I mean, the reality is you're running against a lot of headwind. I mean, the odds of your failure are high. Funds are tight. There's that decision of what do you do with the limited capital that you have. A lot of times you have a short leash that you got to outrun some stuff. And there's a decision point where you got to figure out, do you bring in more investors and what do you do? And so there's a whole bunch of areas you got to think about. And I always prioritize sales. You know, sales is number one to me because, you know, when revenue is good, everything else tends to be good, right? You know, we used to say revenue cures all. And so if it's good, if sales are good and the ROI of your investments, and frankly, if marketing are good, then it's a lot of fun to have your own business. But when they're not, having your own business is pretty much terrifying. So we're with you. We see it. There's other things, obviously, you got to think about: staffing, the offering that you go to market with, and how you position it, and the hot points and pricing that you use, and the technology that you bring on board, monitoring choices, which I've stricken through because obviously you've made a good decision with Monitronics, so that's not something you have to worry about. So you can check that one off the list. Space needs, you know, as you start to look at, well, I got to hire some people, or I got to start to grow the business. There are office size restrictions that you got to start thinking about. The scary accounts receivable, accounts payable thing that starts to pop up, and how we're going to pay for all this and get the money that we have owed to us, and all that. And Monitronics is able to provide a lot of services, but there's still a lot of things you got to kind of think through on your own. Investors, burn rate of the capital you have, a whole list of stuff. Obviously, we probably have opinions on a lot of these things just from having a small business ourselves, but there's definitely some two things that we feel like we have some more expertise than some of the others. So today our focus is on the circled area, the sales approach and marketing. So we're going to spend some time talking about the sales slides, and then we're going to touch on marketing a little bit more on kind of an overview, the must-haves that we think you should be looking at. And then on next month's webinar, we'll actually drill more into some of the lead generation thing, which we believe lead generation should be an area that you should focus on the most because that has the closest investment return. Pardon me. So let's look at the sales approach. I always, not to oversimplify it, but I always look at it as there's an inside sales approach and there's an outside sales approach. You know, and you could get on a call with, you know, one person or another, and they'll tell you why outside sales is the secret, and then the next guy will tell you why inside sales is the secret. You know, and I think there's clear pros and cons to both, and there's things you got to think about when doing both. And so we thought we would take some time and look at each individually, and then give you some data points to consider. So let's look at the inside growth strategy first. Why would you do that, right? What is inside growth? Number one. One, it's bringing in customer service people, not post-sale but pre-sale. So call center, basically setting up a call center and following a model where you're selling it over a lot of the systems over the phone. There's some great strengths to it. For one, if you just kind of go in the left column, you know, what is it, right? Well, one, a lot of people get into it because it's scalable. It's one of these things where you can quickly add people. It's one of these things where you can quickly add geography. So, you know, we've seen dealers that start in one city and they quickly grow and find that they're very successful in selling things over the phone and quickly are able to add geography in a very cost-effective manner. You know, it's interesting because I know there's a general belief in the security space that you have to go door to door. And you're going to see later as we talk about this a little bit more in detail that I think there's a mix. The door-to-door concept I think is good. It's kind of the base of how we sell in the industry. But there's also a lot of limitations to it as well. You know, scaling is one of the biggest things. And it's funny because I have in my house I have AT&T Uverse. And I've got a digital video recorder here, records all my shows in high def, and then we've got TVs around the house, and they all have these little satellite boxes. And I would argue that my cable or my TV, my DVR that I use for my home for my cable system is more intricate than my security system, and yet AT&T never sent out a sales guy to sit down and talk about the value of recording my shows digitally and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot that can be done over the phone. The first guy I met was the tech, and he was putting it in. He had the box under his arm, and he said, "Let's get to work." And I said, "Let's go." So I think there's a fine line where you can sell things over the phone and book it and log it and be done. But I think there's also, especially in the markets you're in, I think there's also a blend for outside, and we're going to look at that next after this slide. So kind of going down the list, if you go on this road, though, so this is kind of path A, it does require investment in a formal lead generation program. You know, you can't just have people sitting around a room staring at each other, and so you got to come up with places for them to call and things for them to do. The trick is setting something up so that their phone is ringing and not having them dial out a ton of stuff, because it opens up a big can of worms that a lot of companies have had to wrestle with when you start, you know, kind of becoming a telemarketing company. There's all kinds of restrictions that you have to register with various states, and there's do not call lists that you have to manage, do not call lists and things like that. So it gets a lot more hairy when you start dialing out, but when people are just calling you, you can do that all day long. Going down the list, you know, when you start looking at people like this, it requires a draw, or you can do, in most cases, they'll do a fixed comp plan. Some places will pay these people an hourly rate. I've seen anywhere between 10 to 15 bucks an hour. They'll pay somebody to come in. They'll pay them, you know, per appointment they set or per deal they close, some kind of bonus structure. I've seen people attempt a draw that makes it feel more like a sales kind of thing, which works pretty well. It's just kind of however you want to do it. I tend to think that when you work with a draw, you're appealing to more of a sales type of person that views this as an inside sales job. While I think when you go with a comp plan with a bonus structure, you're going to get more of a staff employee kind of feel, and I think you tend to get a little bit more of a hungry person when there's a draw. So I've always kind of leaned more to the draw than just the pay the staffing part. But nonetheless, you got to think through that. And then there's also a higher technical and infrastructure support requirements. So you got to have a place for them to sit. Obviously, you need to have a phone. So there's things you got to think about. And we're going to give you some ideas that help there. And on some considerations, however, as you kind of go down the same list, you know, it is scalable, but there may be some oversight required. You can't just have a room of 3 people on a call center and then, you know, you're out in the field trying to close the deal. So it does require some oversight. There are some costs that have to be attributed to an actual lead generation program, but since you can sell leads you can sell deals over the phone, your turn rate should be higher. You should be able to sell more deals because obviously you're not having to drive out to their house. If you can hit them on the phone and take them through your model, your chances of volume are higher. The headcount just alone, right? I mean, you can get a kid out of college. You know, even if you backed into a draw where you're paying them 30,000 bucks, they're thrilled. You know, they're thrilled. You can teach them your business, park them in a chair. You may not keep them more than a year or two because they're hungry to move on through their career. But nonetheless, it's a good starting point. You get a sharp person that's willing to kind of get after it. While a lot of times in the outside sales arena, you can get a cheaper person, but a lot of times you don't want them crashing and burning while they're sitting in someone's house. You know, most people that I talk to usually go the other route where they go get the killer from ADT and they recruit them to come, you know, hey, you and I, we're going to do this together. We're going to build this thing here in Minneapolis, and you know, and they send the killer out, and they cost more. You know, even if you work out a comp model where it's not out of your pocket, they still have to generate a minimum of about $80,000 a year, or sometimes more, just to be content. The last thing is that around the technical requirements, there is some software that you can put in that you need to pay obviously more for, and then there's some office space that you have to kind of think about. N2O, one of the things that we do, and the reason we have a pretty interesting viewpoint into this, is that we have a call center, and it's about a 40-seat call center, and we have the ability to cut it up. So we have companies that will say, look, I want to kind of go on this path, but I'm not quite ready to hire somebody. You can timeshare somebody on our end to start, and they can kind of be your person, if you will, dedicated to you for a block of hours, and then they're selling. So because we start at that point, we get in these conversations a lot, and there's just a lot of things you got to kind of think about. But this is a great way to start. When you look at the other approach, the outside sales strategy, also a great way. So we'll kind of talk about some of the pros and cons here. On the outside sales growth strategy, number one, we kind of kid around and call it a decentralized team because it's mobile. It's a group that's lives in Starbucks if they're good, right? If they're living in your office, there's bigger problems. But if they're good, they're living in Starbucks, they're running around, they're going door to door, they're canvassing, they're calling on anything they can get their arms around. And they usually have expertise. They usually have been in the industry a while. They know how to overcome objections. They represent your brand well. They give the customer a feeling of not only a local presence, but that there's credibility with your brand. And it's a great first step. In fact, a lot of times when we meet a security company, that's the very first decision they made was to bring in Bobby from XYZ security company, and he's going to be our sales guy, right? So go get him, Bobby. So it's a good first step, but I think as you make your second step is when you probably need to start thinking about what are some other choices that we need to consider. If you are calling on the commercial sector at all, you got to have this. I mean, you got to have a salesperson. You really, I don't believe, unless it's super light commercial like dry cleaners and pizza shops. Once you get up above that, you got to have somebody that can go out with a presentation and take them through your security solutions, just because that's how the commercial side tends to operate. In general, when we look at guys like this, when we talk to a security dealer owner, how are you going to get leads for Bobby? Well, he's got SGLs. He's got self-generated leads. He's from the business. He knows everybody. He knows that area. He's going to go knock on doors, and they just completely discount the need that Bobby's going to need leads. And I'll kind of just bebop back and forth between the overviews and considerations because they're linear. Here's the thing. You do need a formal lead program regardless, right? I mean, there's a couple factors when you don't. Number one, Bobby just shows up at your door. You don't know who this dude is. It's the mom who's home during the day, and there's some slick guy at the door, and he's asking if you have a security system, which I don't even know if you even want to answer that truthfully. And I think also that a lot of unfortunately, our industry is so fragmented of small companies. A lot of them have kind of messed it up for the rest of us. And that, the other day I was looking here, and I had a statement stuffer that we got from somewhere for Protection One that said, "Beware of summer's here. Beware of door-to-door sales guys. They're not reputable. They're going to do this and that and this and that." I'm like, golly, man, they're really making it sound bad, and it's not. And then I get my neighborhood newsletter, and it had beware of door-to-door sales scams for alarm systems in our neighborhood newsletter. And then I opened the Chronicle, and there was the same article, and I was like, man, it's crazy. Here's coming from all angles. And I think I don't know if it's identity theft or someone's asking if you have security, and so they're thinking, what, are you going to come back and rob me or what? So I think there's some fear today that wasn't there even. I don't know when it started. I don't know when that fear started, but it did start. So I think if Bobby was sent there because the telemarketing team lined up an appointment for him, or he had their information from a move list or something where he has a lead source, it gives him more credibility that he's stopping by on purpose and not just running around trying to peddle alarm systems. So I think that's a big thing. The call quality, obviously, because there's a reason, right? Because remember we said in the beginning, the security industry is an event-driven business. Nobody wakes up and says it's a great day to get one. So if he's there because they're moving, if they've made an inquiry, any of these things, it's going to allow your outside sales guy to be successful. While most of the calls he's going to go on are going to be in that super cold category we defined earlier. So his success rate is going to be much lower. And then if you can create any event or surround any event, his success rate will be higher. And then there's the whole long-term motivation. I mean, I've seen this a lot. The guy comes in, he's a super stud from another company, and he's it's going to be great. He's going to take over the world. We're going to kill this thing. And the reality is, 6 months in, a year in, he's already cashed in all those favors. He's already hit the neighborhoods that he knows, and he's looking for ideas at this point. And frankly, if he was a big enough stud that you brought him in, he's probably a big enough stud that he's going to leave you. And so you're now holding the bag, and now you got to kind of figure, what do I do now? And so I think there's a long-term psychological thing that happens when you don't give them any air cover at all. So either way, you got to budget for that. A lot of the reasons two people move into this is they say it's going to be affordable because I'm going to do a commission only. He's going to be commission only, and that does work. But at some point they're going to want a base. They've got to. It impacts your credit. It shows up you don't have any salary unless you can show continuous years of documented salary and things of that nature. So you're going to find no matter what you end up with some kind of base plus commission. So just at least know going into you're going to end up at that point. And if you don't, you're probably going to lose them. And then the other is, that kind of minimal technical infrastructure requirements. And I do challenge that because I think it's kind of the penny wise, pound foolish in that you bring someone in from the outside because he's got all these great relationships, but you don't put in like something as simple as a CRM system or a contact relationship management system like ACT or Goldmine or Salesforce or even just Outlook. So what happens is, this person's successful, and then one day they quit, and all you know is what they sold. You don't know what deals they were working. You don't know what neighborhoods they've hit because none of it's been tracked. And so now you're kind of there, bluff scratching your head. When if in the beginning, when they first came on board, you were to say, all right, man, here's how we roll here. Everything has to be loaded into the into the content system, the CRM system. And that's how we track things, and we're going to support you, and this is how we're going to do it. So that is the wise thing to do, and we do recommend that you at least start with something. It doesn't have to be expensive. Let's go on to the next slide here. So we recommend a hybrid. We think that there's merit to both, and I think that a strong lead program that leverages the web, social media, websites, marketing, all of these areas are what keep everybody busy. And I think if you kick off a lead program, you'll find that probably, like if you were to do both and you were to look back a year later, I think you would find about 80% of your volume from a transactional perspective, maybe not from a dollar amount, is going to have been generated from your call center. And probably 20% will have been generated from your door-to-door, because I think there's a need for both. I think especially when you get into higher-end homes or larger, more expensive homes, they may want to talk to somebody to just walk the premise and just make sure that they'll be able to, that your system or your base deal will adequately protect their home. So I still think there's a need for that, but I think that can all be queued up through your actual call center. So let's take a quick second on if you go down going back to the inside sales program approach. Remember we talked about technology. I did want to kind of just bring something up that is kind of cool. If you do have to go down that road of the inbound call center, one of the biggest areas we see companies hit that wall is they can find the people, they can usually find the space, they can usually scrounge up a telephone at Best Buy, but then they go, well, how do I mean, and they get somebody on the phone and they're making calls, but it just doesn't feel like they're getting anything done. They don't feel like they're busy enough, and they don't feel like they're really, they don't have enough people that could really handle any kind of higher volume, and they don't really know how they would process it anyway. And there's some pretty cool tools, and we don't sell any of these tools, so we're not endorsing anybody. We're just making you aware of some of the things we've looked at, and I'm going to kind of move quick through this, but you'll have these slides if you want to come back and review them in more detail. But the call center software is pretty cool in that it gives you a 1-800 number that calls can be coming into, and then what it does is you can have call center reps logged in the office. You can have 1 or 2 in the office that are logged in, and you can have 1 or 2 at home logged in if you want to scale that way and you didn't have any other space requirements at your office. And then it'll route it. So it'll say, okay, Billy's up and Susie's up, and it'll route the calls round robin style to whoever's logged in. So it's a pretty cool way to kind of take that next step and beef up the volume. And it's a nice way to do that without having to get a bunch of phone lines and basically turn into a telemarketing center, which is very expensive. Some requirements that when we were looking at it for another customer, I just threw some out here just more for your use. things that we felt like were must-haves to get into the game. You know, and I won't read this list, but the whole concept of the round robin, the concept of having various DID numbers, direct inward dialing numbers, that we could give for various call center campaigns, so we would know where they came from. The ability for, we didn't want to have to buy a bunch of phone systems and all other junk. We just wanted to be able to use laptops. So we wanted some technology that was hosted in the cloud where you could plug a headset into your laptop and you're on. You know, just you're good to go. You just leverage the IP connection, which is kind of cool. You want to be able to monitor the calls and to be able to intercept and make outbound calls and then record them, you know, for you know, kind of quality purposes. If you want to, especially as you're looking at bonuses and things like that, and then the ability to have some call script log. So, you know, if it comes in through one channel, you could have a script, and if it comes in another channel, you could have a script. So these were all requirements that we thought were important. And we found that hosted platforms were probably the best way to do it, because you didn't have any upfront costs. You didn't have to pay for hardware. You didn't pay for all this. You just paid per user per month, period. And we also liked that you could do it in the office or at home. So you could have one or two people in the office, and then, you know, you could solicit some people that, you know, want to work out of their house a couple hours a day. They can log in and take calls. So it's a cool way to scale, kind of grassroots guerrilla warfare style. When we were looking at them, the average range was about $200 to $150 a month per user, and it obviously got cheaper as you had more people involved. But it could be as simple as one seat, although there's no point of doing it with one seat because they could just call them. but if you had, you know, 2 or 3, obviously. And then there was a small fee for the 800 number. But what was cool is you had unlimited usage for the minutes because it was using the IP connection, so you didn't run up a huge phone bill. On the outside sales part, that too has some investment, and we did a lot of work around this at Sonatrol. And this was, I would say, one of the secret sauces is you got to get good people. And it's one thing when you bring in the one person, but as you start to think to bring in 2 or 3, in the case of Sonatrol, we had to bring in 100, and it's kind of a daunting task. And so we spent a lot of time looking at the killers that we had that were just smoking it. We were like, man, if I had 20 of this person, this woman, if I had 20 like her, we could take over the world. So what are the characteristics of those people? So I wanted to kind of touch on these, and you'll have these on your, if you want to download the presentation, but I'll hit them, I'll go through these as well real quickly. But you got to find somebody that's naturally suited for business development. They got to be assertive. They got to want to enjoy opening up new accounts. They got to like upselling versus maintenance. You want somebody that kind of goes crazy that's just in maintenance mode. You want a pressure-oriented, strong-minded, independence, autonomy. They like unstructured selling roles, proactive, competitive, energetic. They thrive under quotas, goal-oriented, setting up direction and wanting control, to be able to control the process, delivering a fast-paced presentation with imparting a sense of urgency at the end to push for the close, that's highly successful, a strong closer. And that's the #1 failure point of outside salespeople is they're crappy closers. You know, they're nice people, crappy closers, and frankly, it doesn't help you, right? You go to all that work and you don't even close it. So you need them to close, oftentimes early, oftentimes often, and if it delays, sometimes you want someone that gets frustrated. You want them doggedly persistent, never afraid to ask for the order, and you want them to be direct and using a benefits-oriented close where they're not just hammering them, but actually, taking the objection, coming up with the right way to overcome that, and spitting it back. But if you can get some people like this, you will kill it. The trick is finding people like this and identifying that. And we did a lot of work around how you find people like that, and that's probably for a later webinar. But when you do find people like that, you also have to know there's a dark side. And I just want to tell you some things that we learned from all this. Here's the dark side. You got to create a hunter culture or they will quit. And what we mean by that is you got to celebrate the wins. Man, when they come back to the office, you got to be high-fiving. We used to call it dancing around the fire telling war stories. That's the culture that these people blossom in. And if you don't have that culture, they are not going to stick around. You never want them to feel micromanaged, but you should never wince in creating a sense of accountability. You want to give them a long leash, but not unlimited freedom. You got to give them boundaries, or they'll give away the farm. You got to tell them This is as low as you can go on the price, and this is our solution. Don't make one up in the car ride on the way home. You got to support them because they can leave a big wake behind the boat. You know, if you ever see a speedboat and that wake's just coming off the back, knocking other boats around, I mean, there will be a wake, but you got to manage to it. And you also have to know there will be at times a lack of attention to detail and some post-sale problems. They're probably not always going to listen as well as they should because that's their DNA. And if the sales cycle is too long, they're going to get frustrated. And they will almost always close for the sale, even when they probably shouldn't, but you got to love them for that. But if you know this going into it, and you know you've got the right DNA, and you get this army, you will kill it. You will absolutely kill it. But if you don't get these kind of people, you will just find kind of tepid, lukewarm results. So just some lessons learned. We actually have a training thing that we do. This is our acronym, N2O's acronym, the IDEAL approach. And we actually have a program that talks about how you identify the right candidates, how to use profiling to make sure they're right, how to train them. Then you got to assimilate in your business, and then you got to show some leadership and guide them to be successful. But this is really geared more to companies that are trying to hire a bunch of reps, not a couple. So I did throw this in here as a methodology that we typically follow, but it's not something I think that you would probably, I think the basic tenets you may be able to use, but it's not something that we would recommend for a small security company that's just starting out. So let's talk a little bit about marketing for a second, and then I'm just double checking questions good. The 5 goals of marketing, you know, and I think a lot of people scratch their head with marketing. You know, the thing is, marketing needs to be able to create measurable revenue-generating programs. It needs to build your brand. It needs to build tools to help your people be successful. They need to create systems that make you productive and solutions and product sets that you take to market to make sure they're competitive. That's what marketing does. It does it at a little company, and it does it at a big company. And I think a lot of people pick and choose this list, but this is the area, if you start to invest in marketing, that marketing owns. How much should you spend on marketing? We get this a lot, and it's different if you're a business-to-business, which is you're a company selling to a company, or business to consumer, which is B2C, which is a business selling to a consumer or a homeowner. So most of you guys are going to be in the B2C category. And I can tell you this metrics that we pulled are for the B2B benchmarks, but the reason we're showing them to you is that we find that if we showed you the business to consumer metrics, you would probably go crying. So I'm going to show you the B2B benchmarks, which are less because they, but you know, for a small company, 5 to 8% of your revenue should be earmarked for marketing. You know, you should just budget for it. And if you're a fast growth company, if you're wanting to grow fast, you should be earmarking 5 to 12%, and that's of your gross revenue. Okay. And there's some factors that impact this if your business is more mature, but this is kind of for our industry and those kinds of things. I've seen companies spend more. I've seen companies spend a lot more. I've seen them spend less, but those that spend less typically don't ever go anywhere anyway. So, but the ones that grow are usually in that fast growth kind of category. And then once you get that money, you should then figure out where do you spend it and how do you break it up. So what are the tactics, right? You know, in business to consumer, which is where we all are, these are the things that people do. Mass brand, billboards, TV, print, radio, very expensive. Direct mail, some demand generation, yard signs, you know, people seeing the yard signs helps, door hangers helps. Doing things in the community, being a thought leader, talking about security, you know, things like that. Email blast, telemarketing, trade shows, online advertising, that kind of stuff. These are the things these are really the tools in your toolbox. You just got to figure out which ones work, which ones don't, and the yield of each, because they all have various price tags. If you compare that to B2B, it's totally different. You know, when you're selling to a company, you know, you've got a whole bunch, since you guys aren't in this area, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it changes. You know, it's more about targeting specific groups, sending very tailored messages, certain customer events, national account strategies, you know, solution roadmaps. There's all these other things that you do when you're selling to a company that are different than the business consumer. So just to level set the conversation, the two areas of marketing are fundamentally different. So with all that, you know, let me just give you the easy, right? Let's just make this simple. What are the must-haves that you have when you're trying to do, when you're on a budget, right? When you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money. What are the things you got to do? Number one, elevator pitch. This is the single area we see companies fail over and over again, and we kid around. So, you know, sometimes we call it the bar room pitch, but you know, you're sitting next to somebody, in a bar and they go, hey man, what do you do? And you jump in and you go, well, we're the premium, blah, 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 blah. And you go into this 5-minute dissertation on your business, and then they just want to go put a bullet in their head. And you just can't do that to people, and it doesn't help you. And you got to find a way to tell your story in 30 seconds or less, but not just your story, but why you're different, because that's really all that matters. The secret to marketing is telling people concisely why you're different. So we do some work around that, and if you want, we can kind of help you brainstorm, but you got to find a way to explain who you are and why you're different. The other is telling that story outside of the elevator pitch into something, an overview. And this is something that oftentimes is just a one-pager that talks about who you are, what you're about, what is your offer, you know, if it's a home security package for whatever price, you get these widgets and wares. And that should be a PDF that you can email somebody or printed for your door-to-door guys to hand out. But it gives the offer credibility. And even if you make it a promotion, you know, it's good for the next 90 days or something like that, so there's a sense of urgency. But either way, you got to give them something, because otherwise you're going to spook people. You know, they got to feel like there's that you're a legitimate company with a legitimate offer. So, and Monitronics has a lot of great tools in the Pro Shop that can help you do a lot of stuff. The other is the next thing they're going to do. You're going to you know, you got your elevator pitch down, you got your brochure. I presume you have business cards and the logo. And then it's going to be, they're going to go to the web, and they're going to see if you have a website. They're going to check you out. And we see a lot where guys will say, well, I'm going to build a website. But it's like $5 grand to build a website, minimum. I'm seeing it sometimes it's $20 grand, but $5 grand if you shop it for a respectable website. I mean, you could get a little cheapy, but that's what they start. Monitronics has made it easy for you. They actually have some website templates already done that you just have to implement. So if you're looking at that, you should check that one out first. And then the pre-website is something, if you just need to get something up, that's something you can get up in a couple hours. But it's just an online brochure. It just shows people that you're real, which is really the most important thing when you're starting out. The other is pay-per-lead programs. You know, when you have limited bucks, N2O has a program where we can deliver leads to you as cheap as $20 a lead. So if you just think about that, you know, you got very limited money, and you're sitting there thinking, well, man, I could do Google AdWords, I guess. And you know, we've seen guys spending $30 a click. That's just to show up on your website, much less actually come and become a lead. So there's a lot of choices that you make because you have limited funds. A pay-per-lead is a pretty good way to start, and I think we actually have a slide on that. And the last is some direct mail and email marketing. We're not going to actually touch on that much in here, but it is a great way to start and get the word out and whatnot. So this is the e-brochure pre-website that Monitronics has available to you. It is a template. We can help you implement that, and it's something very simple. If you do not have a website, I would immediately start on this, and you can slap your logo up there, and we can get it live for you, and at least you have something. Let's talk about the pay-per-lead. There's two that we do, and so I'm going to talk about them, not promoting our wares, but just because we have a little bit more of a position of authority around them, and we think they're pretty powerful. The first one is in the telemarketing arena. Now, we do offer a telemarketing package, just hours, no different than, like I said earlier, that if you had someone in the telemarketing center. But if you had a formal telemarketing program, this is something that a lot of the nationwide companies, almost all of them across the board, use a program like this. And basically, our call center calls new homeowners or opt-in information. Somebody, you know, filled out a life insurance quotation, and in there it asks them if they own their own home. So, you know, we got the list as a third party, and, you know, we know that they own their own home, and that's a good place to start, right? And they've opted in to allow people to call them, so you're covered. So we call them up and talk about this big promotion we're doing. It's a security system, you know, $850 value system for free. You just have to pay an installation charge and the monthly monitoring, and, you know, do you own your own home, yes or no? And if you do, are you currently under contract with another provider, yes or no? No, you're not? Great. Let me transfer you to somebody in our sales department, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about this promotion. Boom. And it goes to you. And then it's your job to sell it and close it and do it all. These are what I call cold leads, because this is a guy making meatloaf at 5 o'clock at night that could care less about getting a telemarketing call. So, you know, it's got to be a deal or they're not going to do it. I mean, because there's been no event. So, but this is a proactive solution versus a lot of the other things that you do in marketing are reactive. So this is something that can go infinitely scalable. The average close rate in this kind of activity is 6 to 8%, and your average cost per lead is 15 bucks. What's cool about this lead is it's exclusive, but the challenge is that you got to have a pretty compelling deal. The other challenge is in this program, you got to be able to do at least 50 leads a day, because it's just not geared for starting up. That's why we have our kind of entry-level telemarketing package where we can kind of grow together. Then this is the one. This program can actually scale to 6,000 leads a day to give you an idea of the sheer volume that's there. But just looking at the math, which is how I always kind of looked at it, which is 50 leads a day, 15 bucks a lead, your total lead cost is 750 bucks. If your close rate is at the low end of the scale, say it's 6%, times 50 leads a day, that's 3 deals shooting out of there. So dividing your cost by your leads that you won, that's a 250 lead cost per deal. And as a general, in the security space, a lot of people look at it that, if you can keep your lead cost per deal lower than $400, that's a win, right? So it's in that bailiwick. On the pay-per-lead program, there's lots of sites like that. Service Magic, Buyer Zone, Nitro Quotes. We actually own Nitro Quotes. There's about 100 sites out there that are all focused on certain markets like, MinnesotaSecurityCompanies.com or whatever, CaliforniaSecurityCompanies.com or whatever. Those are sites that we have. But nonetheless, the whole concept is that the homeowner fills out one form and it goes to 3 or 4 companies. And these leads are nice because there typically has been an event, because no one just types in home security companies in LA because they're bored, unless they have a pretty pathetic life. They've typed that in for a reason, and so at least something's going to happen. Now, it's also coming in off the web, so nothing surprises us. I mean, you get crazy. It just goes crazy. It's all over the board. But nonetheless, we find at the end of the day, it is a hot lead, though competitive, and your close rate's about 10 to 15%. And the average cost per lead, I'd say, is about 25 bucks. So if you kind of do the same math that we did earlier on the telemarketing side, you're looking at about a $210 lead cost per deal. So you can see it's pretty much in line with the other one, even though it's competitive, because this is more of a hot lead while the other is more of a cold lead. Now, these 2 areas, the last slide I just talked about and the slide we're talking about now, are areas that when we talk to companies spark an hour of conversation. So rather than getting into these conversations on this call, at the end we're going to give you our information, and we would welcome a call with you offline, and we can answer any questions you have on these programs. Forget us selling you something, just advising you on which ones are good, which ones aren't. In this area, we actually have a pretty cool program where we can get you leads from all the major lead companies. There's 7 of them out there, all for your market, all for this price point of 25 bucks. So we've got a good opinion. We work with most of them, so we can give you some perspective of which ones are good, which ones aren't, things like that. This is the last slide. We're doing great on time. So the last point is that we've talked about you got limited funds. Sales always wins, right? You got to get your sales infrastructure set, whether you want to do it outside sales or inside sales. But we're of course recommending a hybrid. And then you got to figure out how you're going to drive that, right? How you're going to deliver opportunities to them. And I think we're saying that you got to leverage your online stuff, you got to leverage your lead generation programs, and you got to leverage some telemarketing, and you got to kind of feed the machine here. And the last thing is, don't forget brand awareness. It's one of these things that I think a lot of small companies overlook, and something big companies do well. But just something as simple as shirts with your logo on it. Get involved in your community, your chamber of commerce, charity events. Having a reputable business card that looks nice and professional, maybe have a little tagline on the back, list your services, but just be visible. Homeowners want to do business with local companies. I do fundamentally believe that. We see it all the time. I mean, you're probably never going to get to them as quick as one of the big nationwide companies. You're probably never going to give them the same deal that one of these nationwide companies is going to give them. But where you win is that you're local, and that you understand the local ordinances, laws. You're around the corner. You're involved in the community. The police department. Those are reasons people go with the local guy. And I believe, all things considered, they will always go with the local guy because they feel better about it. They feel like they're going to get better service. The reason the local guy doesn't win often is that the local guy is usually too slow. The big companies move very fast. So as you get into these things, speed is it. You got to be thinking about how quickly can I get a hold of these people? How quickly, you got this great trump card that you can play. You got to play it quick and early, and you got to play it right in the beginning. And if you play it, you'll win. But if you show up when the game's over and you lay your card down, then people aren't as interested. So that's around brand awareness. So in the end, there's our checklist. These are the things I would start with. Elevated pitch can happen really in your office with some guys sitting around a table and just talking through what makes us unique. Packaging this stuff in a brochure, we can help you with that, or you're free to do it on your own, but tell your story. The paper lead program is a good, affordable way to do it, and then the website. Those are all things that we definitely recommend. So this is the end of the presentation. You know, if there's any questions, obviously feel free to throw one in the chat window. Of course, you can also contact us after the webinar. This presentation, the PDF, is posted on that web address on the screen. It's N2O Marketing / Monitronics.aspx. And N2O, just so you know, is you know, we kind of like the muscle cars, and you know, it's the whole concept of, you know, in the old days, putting the nitro in the muscle car, it just takes off roaring down the highway, and so that's where we got the brand, just more of a sidebar. But our website is shown there, as well as our phone number. And what I'm going to do is I will even put my email address on the chat window here. I just sent it out to everybody. Feel free to email me personally. I'm happy to talk to you, give you some ideas. But you know, I think N2O, as well as Monitronics, we want you to be successful, and we want you to not make some of the same mistakes that a lot of other companies make. And I think there's a strong benefit to you being part of Monitronics, in that you have people around you that have done this before and can share expertise with you, and have some iron sharpens iron here, and you've got people that you can ask before you go down this roads and make some mistakes that frankly a lot of people do make, that can be fairly devastating if you have limited funds. So thanks for being on the call, and we're here if you need anything else. Morgan, did you want to say anything else, or are we good? All right. Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.